NFL training camps get started in just about 2 weeks, which also means fantasy football drafts are on their way. But before you get slotted with that first overall pick, you won't want to miss my top 15 quarterback rankings for this upcoming 2025 season. You won't want to miss this. Welcome back to IDP Plus. I am your host, Professor Locks, Dr. Derek Bennett. And in this episode, we will be talking fantasy football quarterbacks. We're talking redraft rankings for this episode. We've already gone through dynasty rankings. So just a quick overview, making sure if you don't know what the difference is between dynasty versus redraft. Redraft is your typical fantasy football leagues. You draft a team every single year with coworkers or friends or whoever, and you roll with it. You slot your guys in week in and week out. Where dynasty, on the other hand, you kind of carry over most of your roster. Obviously, you're just drafting rookies within the dynasty realms. But in this episode, we're talking redraft fantasy quarterbacks, and I'll say it was pretty tough to narrow down to just 15. There's a lot of pretty good quarterbacks out there. There's a lot of what I'll call average quarterbacks, and it made those last, 6-8 slots a little bit harder to narrow down to come up with 15. I did throw in a few honorable mentions that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But before we get into that, there was some big news coming out of Pittsburgh with my Steelers just a couple of days ago. They're bringing in Ramsey at the cornerback position. Obviously, had to get rid of, trade Minkah Fitzpatrick down to the Miami Dolphins, where he started his career. Just a little bit about that little trade there, and obviously they brought in Jonnu Smith for that pick swap as well. Coming from a Steelers fan, I think it serves the Steelers pretty well, to be honest with you. I think bringing in another receiving threat at tight end should provide another option for Aaron Rodgers and that offense. The offense as a whole is pretty young outside of Aaron Rodgers, and now Jonnu Smith. And Jonnu Smith and Artie Smith have quite the history of playing some pretty good ball back in the day at a couple of different places when he was with when they were with the Titans and with the Falcons. But on the defensive side, that was the bigger side of this trade. You trade away basically an all-pro safety in Minkah Fitzpatrick back down to the Dolphins in place of Ramsey. I think it's one of those things where Minkah had a couple years left on his deal. He hadn't played up to the massive contract that he got a couple years ago. I think he's only had one interception over the last 2 years. And when he signed his last contract, that made him the highest paid safety in the league. Like I said, he just hasn't necessarily panned out to be that type of a player over the last couple of years, whether defenses are just not throwing to his side of the field is hard to say. But, he will definitely be missed just as a defensive leader, as a captain on that side of the ball. But it's it'll be interesting to see how that defense looks now that he is gone. Obviously, the big thing that they have to do is sign TJ Watt. They have a guy that is an all-pro. He's the heart and soul of that team in TJ Watt that they have yet to sign. I think that's the next big step. Obviously, bringing in Jalen Ramsey will definitely help in the secondary. It'll be interesting to see how they end up using him, whether they'll keep him at outside corner, move him into the slot, take him back into the safety position and kind of fill that Minkus hole. But they also brought in Juan Thornhill this past offseason, which I think is a serviceable piece. But enough about my Steelers, enough about that big trade that happened just a couple of days ago. Let's get into my top 15 fantasy quarterbacks. And I want to start off with some honorable mentions, some guys that, didn't make my top 15, didn't make the cut, but 3 guys that I think have the potential of really making a roster spot on your team. Some guys that you may want to, take in the later rounds, something like that as a backup option, because these guys have a lot of upside as well. But let's start off with my honorable mentions. In this category, we have Brock Purdy, Drake May, and J.J. McCarthy. So of the 3, we definitely know the most of Brock Purdy. He's been in the league for a few years now. The 49ers definitely had a down year last year, but I think most of that was just due to health in general. You had Brandon Ayuk coming back. You have hopefully a healthy Christian McCaffrey. And in general, I think Kyle Shanahan is one of the best play callers in the league. So I think Brock Purdy as a whole had an okay year last year. He himself was a little bit banged up. He only played 15 games, threw for 3,800 yards, 20 touchdowns. He did throw 12 picks. So it's one of those things where he has a lot of upside. He still has options in one Jennings. They still have Brandon Ayuk there. They still have George Kittle. They still have Christian McCaffrey. It would just be interesting to see how they move forward and to see if he continues to be as consistent as he has been over the last few years. He didn't quite make the top 15, but the consistency definitely counts for something. On the other hand, a couple of younger quarterbacks should have been their rookie years last year, Drake May and J.J. McCarthy. Obviously, Drake May stepped in, played 13 games for the New England Patriots last year, threw for just about 2,200 yards, 15 passing touchdowns. He did have 10 interceptions. You kind of figure that with a rookie, but he's not afraid to run the ball. When it comes to quarterbacks in general, Drake May is pretty athletic. He's a guy that can pick it up on the ground. He had 2 rushing touchdowns last year, ran for 400 yards. And this is a guy that they brought in Stephon Diggs in the offseason. Now, coming off of the injury that he had, it'll be interesting to see how they start to integrate him in the offense once he is fully healthy. But Drake May is a guy that has a ton of upside. The New England Patriots made a ton of moves this offseason, so he's a guy that I will be looking for towards the later rounds, but not quite as high, in my opinion, as a guy like J.J. McCarthy. And, J.J. McCarthy is basically going into his rookie year. He got drafted a year ago by the Minnesota Vikings, but I really think that he's going to step in pretty nicely and kind of have a similar year as Sam Darnold did last year. Obviously, J.J. McCarthy was out all year last year with a torn meniscus, had surgery, should be perfectly fine coming back from that. I think they really were being very cautious with their new toy, if you will, in J.J. McCarthy, but he just has so many options to facilitate the ball to, and obviously we got Justin Jefferson there, Jordan Addison, Hawkinson. You got Aaron Jones out of the backfield. He just has weapons all over the field. And not to be remiss, he's got one of the best offensive lines in the league. So a guy in J.J. McCarthy is a guy that I personally will definitely be looking to draft towards the end of my fantasy drafts upcoming in the next month or so. So before we get into the top 15, I do have to tell you a little bit about some fantasy drafting. And in this case, we're talking Fast Draft. Fast Draft is a new up and coming drafting platform that, just really cuts out all the hoopla and the middleman when it comes to the time that it takes to draft a full squad. With Fast Draft, you're doing more of a best ball type of squad. You're going through 6 rounds. Each pick only takes 20 seconds. So you should not have to worry about any draft going over about 10 minutes. And here at IDP Plus, we're trying to help you out a little bit and giving you $50 deposit match with code plus DGenDoc. Yes, plus DGenDoc. So deposit $50 and get $50 free. So what you guys have been came here for is my top 15 quarterback rankings for the 2025 fantasy season. So let's just get right into it. My top 15, in this case, we're playing PPR. We're doing traditional one quarterback leagues here, but in this case, these are dart throws still. Most leagues are probably 10 to 12, 12 to 16 team leagues, and in most cases, these are guys that they have some upside, but are probably just not the guys that I'd be looking for in the first half of your fantasy draft. So starting at 15, we have CJ Stroud. 14 is Justin Fields. Caleb Williams at 13, Dak Prescott, and then Kyler Murray just missing out on the top 10. So with some of these guys, like I said, they have a lot of upside in the case of a guy like Justin Fields. He moved over to the New York Jets this offseason after playing, I think it was 5-6 games in Pittsburgh this past season. And he's a guy that, has been able to put up really, really good fantasy numbers when he has that starting spot all season. He's a running quarterback, but he also can distribute the ball. They got pretty good weapons there in New York. You got a solid number one in Garrett Wilson, but outside of him, it drops off a little bit. You got Josh Reynolds, who they also brought in this past offseason. You got Alan Lazard there as well. But I really think the Jets are going to be a run-first team and really use Justin Fields' threat at the running back position to help spring some of those guys free. Between Justin Fields and Breece Hall, Braylon Allen in the backfield, it should be able to open up all kinds of space for guys like Garrett Wilson and Josh Reynolds to have some one-on-one coverages at times. Now, I skipped over CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud, I'm a Buckeye fan. I'm from Ohio, just about an hour south of Canton, an hour east of Columbus, Ohio. And both of those guys, but CJ Stroud definitely had a down year based on his rookie season last year. He still played all 17 games, threw for over 3,700 yards and 20 touchdowns. Did start having some happy feet back there in the pocket and was basically running for his life a lot of the season. He threw 12 picks, but with CJ Stroud, I think it'll be interesting to see how him and Nico Collins continue to develop their relationship. Christian Kirk is now down there in Houston as well. But besides the lack of support that CJ had up front, they just battled injuries all year last year. Obviously, I mentioned Stephon Diggs earlier is now with the Patriots. He went down pretty early on in the season. But a guy like Tank Dell has just not been able to stay healthy over the last couple of years, has gone down with a couple of major injuries. But they brought in a couple of young wide receivers through the draft as well. But CJ Stroud is a guy that has all the upside in the world as long as he has time to throw the ball to the weapons that he has. Caleb Williams, Dak Prescott, these are a couple of guys that I think could take a little bit of a step forward. Obviously, Dak only played, I think, 8 games last year, threw for just under 2,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 8 picks. Dak's a guy that it seems like every other year he has a hell of a year. Going back to 2023, he threw for over 4,500 yards, 36 touchdowns, and also had a couple of rushing touchdowns. So obviously you still have CD Lamb there. You bring in a guy like George Pickens to put opposite of him. And Dak Prescott could have one hell of a year. Now, obviously the Cowboys offensive line has had some shifting around. We'll see how that unit really comes together. But a guy in Caleb Williams, again, it'll be interesting to see how Ben Johnson can work him into the fray and really start to develop him as a pocket passer, keeping him on time. He has really, really good weapons in Rome Odunze, DJ Moore. They brought in Colston Loveland through the draft. They still got Cole Kmet. So this is a guy that obviously drafted number 1 overall, has all the talent in the world. It'll be interesting to see if Ben Johnson can kind of wrangle him in, keep him in the system that he runs, because we know that Ben Johnson's system, it works offensively. He has been one of the best offensive coordinators. Let's see if he can do it at the head coaching position and really lead Caleb Williams to take that next step. And finally, wrapping out kind of the dart throw category is a guy in Kyler Murray. Kyler, has been a pretty solid fantasy quarterback in the past. He had a little bit of a down year last year, but he kind of came on strong towards the end of the year. He threw for just under 3,900 yards, 21 touchdowns. He ran 5 touchdowns and had 570 rushing yards. So Kyler Murray, just like Justin Fields, is a little bit more dynamic quarterback, can run the ball. And from a fantasy perspective, you want that, right? To pick up some extra easy points just on the ground. Hopefully he can continue to get some rushing touchdowns in there as well. But Kyler, again, I think we kind of forget about the whole development thing. And obviously they brought in Marvin Harrison Jr. A year ago, and he had an okay year. But I really think that he's going to take that next step along with Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, and obviously Trey McBride. I can't forget about Trey McBride. If Kyler could just get him the ball in the red zone, into the end zone, that offense could really, really make things happen. So that really wraps out the kind of 11 through 15. Before we move on to our top 10, I just have to tell you a little bit about IDB Plus in general. IDB Plus, we're giving you all of this information ahead of time before you get into your fantasy football seasons. Check out the website. There's all kinds of great information out there coming from me, coming from Sebastian, coming from a bunch of guys. So grab a subscription while you can. You really just don't want to miss out on a single thing this off season and throughout the season in general. I also have to tell you a little bit about the Fantasy Football Expo. And the Fantasy Football Expo is only a week or so away, so you got to get your tickets fast for this one. But get your 2025 Fantasy Football Expo tickets at thefantasyfootballexpo.com. It's this August. I guess about a month away. This August the 8th through the 10th in Canton, Ohio. Come check out the new fan packages, and you can join us and all kinds of other well-known creators at the NFL Hall of Fame and Village. So let's get into the top 10 fantasy quarterbacks for this upcoming season. We have guys like Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Bo Nix, Patrick Mahomes, and Baker Mayfield, just missing out on that top 5. So moving on to our game managers is what I'm going to call this category. These are guys that, again, have some upside, could sneak into that top 5 fantasy rank towards the end of the season. But these are guys that I see as more game managers. They're not going to have a ton of, big time production weeks where they're just going to, lead your entire squad to a victory. These are guys that are going to contribute week in and week out. You can basically set them and forget them. But at the same time, there may be some matchups that you may want to look towards the second option, or depending on some injuries, some health kind of things, you may want to have a backup option available. But let's start off with Justin Herbert out in LA. He played all 17 games last year, threw for 3,870 yards, 23 touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions. Justin Herbert, obviously, we got Jim Harbaugh at the helm there with the Chargers. He's going to play within that system. He's going to play that basically game manager type of role. Obviously, the Chargers are a run-heavy team with Najee and just escaped me. Anyways, we're not talking about running backs in this one, but with the Chargers, Justin Herbert has been a great regular season quarterback. He hasn't been able to move it along into the postseason to this point at a strong clip, but he's very consistent. He's a really tough guy. The Chargers don't have the best receiving options, but not bad. They have Lad McConkey and then Quentin Johnston on the other side, but I think the big thing with Justin Herbert is really just his consistency. He's a guy that doesn't make a ton of mistakes. They're going to be moving the football pretty consistently, and I just think that Justin Herbert is a really good regular season quarterback at the end of the day. He's a guy that has a ton of potential. Mike Williams is back, but they just have a good young core there. They have one of the best offensive lines in the league. So Justin Herbert making that top 10 at the 10 spot. Jared Goff is the next one. And again, we'll see how the Lions move on from Ben Johnson, but the Lions definitely have a stable of offensive weapons all over the field. Obviously, we got wow. I just completely blank. St. Brown there at the wide receiver position, as well as Jameson Williams. But again, I think this is a team that is just very balanced, and from a running standpoint, is going to open up the passing game, open up the play action, and the Lions should be towards the top of kind of your Super Bowl favorite list yet again. Goff threw for 37 touchdowns just a year ago. I don't see that dipping a ton. Bo Nix, on the other hand, is a younger quarterback, but made it incredible strides in his rookie campaign. Obviously, Bo Nix is a younger NFL quarterback, but he's not a younger quarterback. He had a ton of experience in college, and we saw that last year. With the Broncos, you still have Cam Sutton there. You still have Marvin Mims. And I think the Broncos are going to continue to make strides with their young offense. Bo Nix threw for almost 3,800 yards, 29 touchdowns to only 12 interceptions. But this is another guy that has some sneaky athleticism to him. He's not afraid to put his nose into some defenders and pick some yards up on the ground. So he ran for 430 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. Continuing to move on, Patrick Mahomes. It's a strange thing where Patrick Mahomes has been seen as the face of the league, one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the league, basically since he came into that starting role with the Chiefs. Had an incredible first couple of seasons. The last couple of years, he's dipped a little bit, but that's to his standard. He still threw for almost 4,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, to only 11 picks this past season. He also ran a couple of touchdowns in as well. And again, the Chiefs are the Chiefs. You know, they continue to make changes on the offensive line. Hopefully, they have solidified that a little bit. But you have Rashee Rice coming up back off of his LCL injury. You have Xavier Worthy there. You have Hollywood Brown finally healthy for the entire season. You still got Juju. You still got Travis Kelce. Last time I knew, Travis Kelce is still going to be playing this upcoming season. And as long as Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes are on the field at the same time, you can bet that the Chiefs will be moving the football and putting up some points. So Pat Mahomes sliding in there at the number 7 spot. And then finally, one of my favorite upcoming quarterbacks, not necessarily a young quarterback, but Baker Mayfield. And part of this is due to all of the pieces that they have around him offensively. Just at the wide receiver position, obviously, you still have Mike Evans, who's just absolutely incredible. You have Chris Godwin coming off of injury, but you drafted Emeka Ibuka in the first round, an absolute stud when it comes to route running and just a team-oriented guy. You have Jalen McMillan coming back as well. You have Cade Otton. You have a guy like Bucky Irving in the backfield. They have one of the best offensive lines in the league. I think Baker Mayfield is really set up for another really good season. He threw for 4,500 yards this past season, 41 touchdowns to only 16 picks. So he still does like to have that gunslinger mentality. But I think it's one of those things that he has so many options to throw the ball to. You just got to throw it up to some of these guys and hope that they make a play. Sometimes it doesn't bounce their way. So his interception numbers are up a little bit. But again, a guy that can run the ball a little bit, ran for 370 yards, 3 touchdowns this past season. But Baker, the last couple of seasons down in Tampa Bay, has just been getting better and better. Threw for 4,000 yards the year before. But Baker Mayfield has one of the best squads around him in the league when it comes to quarterback play. So just missing out on the top 5, but Baker Mayfield sliding in at that number 6 overall spot. Before we get to what you have been waiting for with the top 5, I have to tell you a little bit about Bob Lung's Fantasy Football Consistency Guide. I've talked a little bit about consistency already when it comes to quarterback play, but Bob Lung's Football Consistency Guide gives you a leg up on your opponents each and every year. Bob's on his 10th annual edition of the Fantasy Football Consistency Guide this upcoming season for 2025. So purchase yours for a measly $15 on Amazon. Just search 2025 Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, and Bob Lung's Consistency Guide should pop right up there. Now, what you all have been waiting for. Let's talk top 5 fantasy quarterbacks for this 2025 season. And really, let's not be kidding ourselves. It's not that big of a surprise. Let's just see how they shake out 1 through 5. So coming in at number 5, I have Joe Burrow down in Cincinnati, Jalen Hurts over in Philadelphia at number 4, Jaden Daniels slotting in at number 3 over in Washington, and then Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. These are 5 guys that all 5 of them have, the potential to lead your team to a fantasy football championship. All 5 of these guys could go off at any time. They can put up incredible numbers. It just really depends on how they're going to do it, if they stay healthy, and obviously the rest of their team staying healthy as well. But at the same time, I think all 5 of these guys, even if a wide receiver goes down, even if an offensive lineman goes down, these guys can fight through most of those things. So let's talk Joe Burrow really quickly. Obviously he has Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, probably the best dynamic duo at wide receiver in the league. Threw for almost 5,000 yards this past season, 43 touchdowns and only 9 interceptions. Joe Burrow is your prototypical drop back quarterback. He can run the ball a little bit, but he likes to stay in the pocket, throw to those 2 guys out at wide receiver and others. But Joe Burrow, as long as he is given time, he's going to find an open receiver. And it would not surprise me if he gets over that 5,000 yard season this upcoming year. Jalen Hurts, very different than Joe Burrow, but also puts up a ton of fantasy football points. But this is mostly coming on the ground. Obviously, he gets all of those tush-push touchdowns. It's still around. They haven't outlawed it yet. He had 14 rushing touchdowns this past season, threw for only 2,900 yards and 8 touchdowns, but he ran for 630 and had 14 rushing touchdowns. So when it comes to fantasy, it doesn't really matter how they do it as long as they're putting up points, and Jalen Hurts is able to do that week in and week out, averaging almost a rushing touchdown each week. Jaden Daniels, kind of the belle of the ball last year, obviously as a rookie, had an absolutely incredible year, throwing for 3,568 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, ran for 6 more, and ran for almost 900 yards. Jaden Daniels, has all the potential in the world, and the Commanders made a lot of moves in the offseason, bringing in Deebo Samuel, bringing in some offensive line help for Jaden Daniels as well. This is a guy that don't wait around this year to grab this guy because he's not going to be around past the first few rounds, most likely. And then obviously we have Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. They've been around for years at this point, and they always seem to end up in that top 3, top 4 quarterback spot at the end of the year. But Lamar Jackson, obviously a little bit more of a rushing threat. He picks up more yards than Josh Allen. Josh Allen just picks up more rushing touchdowns than Lamar, and that's why I have him at the number 1 spot. He's the league MVP. He's Superman at this point. And for the Bills, they actually added on to that wide receiver room. They bring in a guy like Elijah Moore from Cleveland. He's a young wide receiver that has really, really good upside. But you still have Keon Coleman. You still have Khalil Shakir. And Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, I don't know if I necessarily need to talk about either of them a ton because everybody knows who they are. Everybody knows what they're capable of doing. Health is really the only worry that you have with Lamar or Josh Allen. So that really wraps up my top 15 fantasy quarterbacks for this upcoming 2025 season. Stay tuned on IDP Plus. I know Sebastian and I have broken up the 4 main fantasy position groups: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. So I will be coming out with my top 15 fantasy wide receivers pretty soon, really. So keep an eye out on IDP Plus on YouTube for those other rankings. Obviously, shoot me any questions you have on X or drop them in the comments here on YouTube. But other than that, that's really about it. So like I said, any feedback is welcome. Any comments, questions that you guys might have are always welcome. But until next time, I'm signing off.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.